Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a killer evening here in Radwave City, where it's always the 80s and the future.
I'm your host, Austin Tunes, and we have quite the episode for you tonight, so stay tuned. And remember, funding for the Austin Tunes Show was provided in part by viewers like you. Thank you. The Looney Tunes are some of the most iconic cartoon characters of all time. If you ask a stranger on the side of the road to name a cartoon character they grew up watching, you don't expect to hear many Fillmores or Tuttensteins. But one you could probably count on is a Bugs Bunny or a Daffy Duck. These characters are recognizable to the general masses, even down to their silhouette. And part of that has to do with just how many adaptations of these characters exist. The Looney Tunes have been rebooted, rebranded, and reimagined a million times over, for better and for...
It sure does make me so angry.
So, what's up, Doc?
not better. One of these reboots caught my eye, however, and that's 2011's The Looney Tunes Show. Now, this show is called The Looney Tunes Show, but rather than the usual slapstick humor you're used to, this show is a dialogue-based comedy. The show focuses on Bugs, who is now living in a house in the suburbs, and Daffy, who takes on the role of a deadbeat mooch who lives off of him. The dynamic actually works pretty well and leads to a lot of great interactions between the two. The supporting cast includes Porky, who plays the role of a self-conscious, worrisome friend to Bugs and Daffy, and is normally Daffy's sidekick in his schemes. Speedy, who lives in a mouse hole in Bugs' house, though he spends most of his time at his restaurant. Lola, and later Tina Russo, who make up female counterparts and romantic partners to Daffy and Bugs. And Granny, Witch Hazel, Gossamer, and Yosemite Sam, who play the roles of neighbors to Bugs and Daffy. Out of all the neighbors, I feel like Yosemite Sam is easily the one the show gets the most mileage out of. He plays off of Bugs very well and was one of my favorite parts of the show. A good number of my favorite episodes of the show have him in it. That's not to say the other neighbors are useless though, as they all feel important and each one has a handful of plots to follow. One of my personal favorites is an episode where we figure out that in World War II, Granny was a WAC spy, WAC being an abbreviation for Women's Army Corps.
You! Land this blimp, Frankenheimer! I don't take orders from a woman! I'm not just a woman! I'm a...
Fun fact, I was doing some research and the Wikipedia page on the WACs actually directly brings up this episode of the Looney Tunes Show. I just thought that was funny. One thing I'll give this show a lot of credit for is its characters. Not every character feels like their classic selves, but I find that serves the show well. Most of the changes made to pre-existing characters are either so small they're not noticeable, or so absurd that you can't help but laugh. Changes like Gossamer, who in this series is the sweet timid child of Witch Hazel.
That's my baby!
Or Marvin the Martian, who still wants to conquer the Earth, but is stuck living a boring, mundane life and goes bowling with his friends on the weekend. The longer you watch the show and the more classic characters you see, the more interesting and alive the world feels. It's always fun to see another character you recognize and figure out how the writers are going to manage to write them into this suburban setting. Except you. F*** you. Elmer Fudd, for example, is a talk show host, or Foghorn Leghorn, who is the CEO of a company. Speaking of Foghorn Leghorn, I feel like the episode order for the show was mixed up, or some executive forcibly changed it, because in the episode where we meet Foghorn, his secretary Carol refers to Daffy as the idiot that destroys your company, but this is episode 9, and that's the plot of episode 20. Whoops! Aside from that, however, I have yet to notice any other continuity errors.
Sir, don't you remember? He's the idiot who destroyed your company.
I only remember the positive, Carol. That's why I'm a success.
This show can be a trip to watch sometimes. The writers know how to take a plot and wring every last bit of humor out of it. Like, it's not even explainable, you just have to watch it. The direction they take these plots are so surprising, and yet somehow they always feel like they progress this way so naturally. This is one of those shows that has a good combination of brain on and off jokes too, so it's good for a brainless watch, but if you're paying attention, you'll get even more out of it. Stepping away from the writing, the art direction for this show is amazing too. The show is a very angular style as opposed to most other Looney Tunes projects, which play it safe with more round designs. The style makes it easy to stand out amongst other shows in the franchise. Like, if I showed you a picture of Bugs from Space Jam, Looney Tunes Back in Action, and the later Looney Tunes classic shorts, you wouldn't be able to tell me what it's from, but if I show you this, it's almost immediately apparent. This show also gets creative with its outlines. Though characters will often have bold outlines, the clothing they wear, depending on the color, will normally lack outlines, with inlines that are very similar to the color of the clothing item itself. This makes them stand out as separate from the characters and is very visually appealing. It's especially noticeable in the Season 2, Episode 1 episode Bobcats on 3 because of all the blues and yellows in this episode. Even the color scheme for this show is nice. The show manages to keep a bright palette without being painful on the eyes. No problem solvers vibes here, just a show with bright colors that I can watch for hours and not feel my corneas burn. I even like some of the small visual motifs, like the splatters of paint used to texture objects around the show, which even make up the clouds in some scenes. Small details like that go a long way. Now, let's get this out of the way. When talking about the Looney Tunes show, you also have to talk about the series of shorts that are included in the show. There are two types of shorts that appear throughout the series. Not every, but most episodes will include either a Merry Melody segment or a 3D animated Roadrunner and Wall-E Coyote segment. The Merry Melody segments are these short musical segments focused around one or a handful of characters from the show and share the names of the original Merry Melody shorts. These can actually be pretty entertaining. None of them are mind-blowing or anything, but they can get a smile out of me. My personal favorites are Queso Bandito, the Wizard, and of course Grilled Cheese, which is obviously the best one since it gets referenced in a different Merry Melody segment. As for the Roadrunner segments, I find them to be lackluster. Not only do most of them feel like the most uninspired slapstick in the entire Looney Tunes franchise, but for some reason a lot of the hits seem to lack impact. That's not to say these shorts are terrible, but when you're binging the show, it just makes you want to skip most of them. The only ones that were even really memorable for me were the ones where the Roadrunner and Coyote are ninjas because the choreography caught my eye, and the one where they're on a bridge balancing because it actually entertained me. But for the most part, these segments felt like a miss. They only appear in the first season, too, as it proved too expensive to animate a 2D cartoon and 3D shorts, so Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner became reserved for cameos in the show. Regardless of how I feel about the short segments, the rest of the show is actually a treat to watch. But if that's the case, then why did it only last 2 seasons? Well, when asked, co-creator Tony Schiavone stated that the show was cancelled to make room for a new Looney Tunes project called Wabbit, because the Looney Tunes show wasn't well received by executives at Warner Bros. The show's plot contains less visual gags and are more adult-oriented dialogue-driven than the past Looney Tunes projects. The show explores topics kids can't relate to, like dating, love triangles, employment, and rooming. It didn't help that long-term fans of the Looney Tunes were upset that it wasn't the slapstick cartoon they wanted. The show managed to get a bad reputation, and despite being popular for the network, regularly pulling in 2 million viewers, it got the can. The only praise the show ever received for the majority of the time it was on air was for its amazing voice performances, which is a given for a Looney Tunes project. It seemed fans and network execs had made up their mind. The show that replaced it didn't seem to fare much better, as it was dragged from Cartoon Network to Boomerang before finding its home on the Boomerang app, with reruns airing on Boomerang TV again. Not only that, but the show was plagued with hiatuses and changed its name to New Looney Tunes Show in its 2nd season, completely removing any evidence of the Wabbit title. I'm just hoping that Looney Tunes Cartoons, which is the current Looney Tunes project on HBO, doesn't get the same treatment as these 2 shows. But for now, all we can do is hope. Until then,
This is Austin Toons signing off, and good night.